Excellent. So our meeting has been called to order. And the first order of business, I believe, do we do roll call first or the motion to allow remote participation?
I would do the roll call first, just to establish that you have a physical quorum present.
Thank you. A lot of practice on this part. Since there is absent, Ted, will you? Present. Suzanne?
Present.
Harima?
Present.
Colleen?
Present.
Matt Fruth, present. And now is there a motion to allow remote participation of trustees Virginia Bloom?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Is there any further discussion? Hearing none. Those in favor say aye.
Aye. Aye.
Those opposed say nay. Any abstentions? It is approved. Virginia, welcome.
Thank you.
Next. Next item on our agenda is approval of our June 22nd minutes. Those are in the packet. Does anyone have any changes, questions, or comments for those minutes? Hearing none, is there a motion to approve those minutes?
So moved.
Moved by Ted. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Seconded by Colleen. Is there any further discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor of approving the minutes say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed say nay. Any abstentions? Hearing none, those minutes are approved. Next, we'll move on to public comments. I did not receive any notifications of via email or the form. David, did you?
I did not.
I did not either. I see no other public comments besides are the representatives from SIGIC. If we can have that presentation.
Yeah, we're ready. Hi.
Hello. Hi, everyone. Appreciate everyone's time tonight. Wanted to start off too by thanking David, Chairman, Rita, the entire staff for all their help throughout the audit process. We were remote again this year, so I thought things went pretty smoothly, especially the second time around. So they were able to answer all our questions, get us all the info we needed, and be able to get the reports out on time. So what I'd like to do is go over the annual financial report. So that's going to be those bigger reports first. And then I'll also talk about the smaller report, communication to the Board of Trustees. And after that, I'd be happy to answer any questions that you might have. So I'm going to start, like I said, with the annual financial report. And I'm going to turn and kind of walk you through the table of contents just to kind of give you an idea of what's in the report. It's not, it's not a huge report, but it's still, 30, 40 pages. So I just want to point out what's actually in this report. So if you look at the table of contents, first two items are the independent auditor's report and management's discussion and analysis. And I'll talk about those two documents in a moment. After that are the general purpose external financial statements. And those start off with the basic financial statements. You'll see the government-wide financial statements, the statement of net position or your balance sheet, and the statement of activities or your income statement. These are your consolidated financial statements. So they're going to have all of the funds of the library combined. You have all governmental funds, so it's all shown as governmental activities. These have a long-term focus. So they've got capital assets, they've got long-term debt, and they're similar to financial statements in the corporate environment, in the corporate world. After that are the fund financial statements, the governmental funds. These are different. These are shown by major fund, which is your general fund, and then your two non-major funds are combined and shown as one column. These have a short-term focus. They have no capital assets, no long-term debt, and what they're basically focused on is current spendable resources, similar to how you budget. So on pages 6 and 8, then there's a reconciliation that shows you how you get from that short-term focus to that long-term focus. So it's kind of trying to get the best of both worlds. You have similar corporate financial statements, but then you also have current spendable resources financial statements similar to how you budget. After that are the notes to the financial statements on pages 9 through 25. A whole lot of great additional information that supports basic financial statements, and they should be read in conjunction with those financial statements. After that is the required supplementary information, or RSI, I might refer to it as. This information and then the MD&A is also considered RSI. These we perform limited procedures on, but not enough to give an opinion on. So I just want to point that out. In the RSI is a budget versus actual report for your general fund, and then information on your Illinois Municipal Retirement Fund, and then your other post-employment benefit plan, retiree health. And we'll take a look at the IMRF schedule in a moment as well. And then after that are the combining and individual fund financial statements. So those show you some additional detail on your two non-major governmental funds. And then finally, other supplemental information. There's a detailed schedule, budget versus actual for your general fund. So what I like to do is just start on page 1, the independent auditors report. These are the 2 pages that we as the auditors prepare and are responsible for. Management's responsible for the rest of the annual financial report. And those responsibilities are explained here on page 1. Turning over to page 2, up at the very top is the paragraph that most people are interested in. That's the opinion paragraph. And again, this year we issued an unmodified opinion, which is the highest level of assurance that we can provide to the library. Now, after the independent auditors report is the management discussion and analysis. I've probably told you this the past couple of years. Great overview of the library's financial position and changes in financial position. It'll point out any trends or significant changes that might have occurred during the year. It has some 2-year comparative data that you can't find elsewhere in the report. So I tell you every year, if you only want to read one thing in the report, read the MD&A. So it's a good overview of the library's finances. All right, moving on to page 5. Now, these are the governmental fund financial statements. On page 5 is the balance sheet for your governmental funds. And you'll see these are the short-term focused financial statements. The general fund is your first column. Just want to point out your fund balance. Down at the bottom, the assigned for subsequent year's budget, that covers the budget deficit that you had. Plus the unassigned is about $6.8 million this year, which is just a slight decrease from the prior year, $6.9 million. And then I'll point out too, that's about 62% of your current year expenditures. So it's about a 7-month reserve. And then page 6, actually page 7 is a statement of revenues, expenditures, and changes in fund balance for your governmental funds. Again, the first column is your general fund. You'll see the net change in fund balance down towards the bottom of the page. This is basically your net income. So you had a small loss this year. Last year, there was a net positive change of about $118,000. And then the last thing I'll point out on the annual financial report is on page 27. And this is just some additional information on your participation in the Illinois Municipal Retirement Fund. So on page 27 is the schedule of employer contributions. So this shows the actuarially determined contribution. That's what the actuary says you should contribute. You're contributing exactly what you should, so there's no deficiency or excess. And then the contributions as a percentage of covered payroll kind of shows you the pension burden on the library. And you'll see that percentage has steadily gone down to its, in 2020, it was 8.81%. And on page 28, you'll see the reason why is basically because the funded status has increased so much. On 28, the schedule of employers' proportionate share of the net pension liability. This basically is going to show you your funded status. And you'll see for 2019, the funded status, the planned fiduciary net position as a percentage of the total pension liability, that's that last percentage, is a little over 100%, almost 101%. So you're basically fully funded in IMRF. So that's all I have on the annual financial report. I want to point out a few things in the auditor's communication to the Board of Trustees. And again, I'm going to turn to the table of contents. Every year, we're required to have certain communication with the board. So that's what's on pages 2 through 4. Basically, pretty consistent routine communication this year. Didn't have any disagreements with management. No delays in the audit, like I said. The only thing we did communicate, we adopted GASB Statement 95, which allowed you to postpone the implementation of certain accounting standards due to the pandemic. So we did did postpone a few GASB pronouncements, specifically GASB 87 related to lease. After that are the adjusting journal entries. These are entries we found as part of the audit process. We're required to communicate those to you as well. So those are on pages 5 through 6. And then I'll point out too, we didn't have any past adjusting journal entries. These would be entries that were deemed to be immaterial, so we just didn't record them. But above a certain level, we have to communicate that to the board. So it didn't have any past adjustments. Whatever needed to be adjusted was adjusted on those AJEs on pages 5 through 6. And then the management letter starts on page 7. And on page 8, the management letter here basically states in writing that there were no material weaknesses. I also want to point out we had no significant deficiencies, and there were no new deficiencies this year either. And then page 12 is the status of the prior year comment. And that's basically due to the segregation of duties due to the smaller staff at the library, the finance staff. So just being cognizant of segregation of duties and segregating as many of those duties as possible, or having compensating controls in place if you can't do that, to the greatest extent you'd like to. So that's all I have on those two reports. I'd be happy to answer any questions that the board might have.
I don't know if this is appropriate for the audit, but as we do our wage repositioning, does that have an implication for funding pension? So we're now looking at doing a lot of equity in wage and all. What are the implications to the pension on that? I mean, we figure paying on in year to year, this is going to cost us X amount. Where does that figure in an audit as we think about our long-term obligation? Does that make sense?
Well, I think I understand what you're asking, but the principal factor that affects the amount that the library is obligated to pay, it really depends on the number of employees we have that are eligible for that, and that is basically over a certain hourly threshold. So it's really, full-time staff and part-time staff who exceed or meet or exceed that hourly threshold. So in other words, it has far less to do with, I think, how much people are earning than whether or not they're eligible for the pension. But I don't know if I'm answering your question.
I guess I'm just wondering about how the audit looks at our long-term obligation.
Well, the pension, the part we pay in the pension is required by law.
Right.
So there's not, that's out of our hands to a certain extent, because based off what our payroll is,
Right.
we have a set obligation that we have to meet. So there's not, and that is all set by state law above us. So we can't fudge that.
I understand.
But the other part of the pension piece is also what everybody else is paying into the IMRF. But our piece of it is we have to make those payments. So it's not like there's not a place where we can kind of play with that.
So again, in other words, there's a set percentage that IMRF requires the employer to pay. And that depends on how many employees are eligible for the pension and the amount of money that they're earning. So primarily based on those two things, IMRF determines, based on the percentage that are required to pay, what our obligation is. So the only way you control that is how much you pay people and whether or not you give them positions that are eligible for the pension. So yeah, it's what we're talking. I think what we're talking about is really, what are our operating budget obligations? Not, I'm trying to understand what your concern is about the audit, though.
It's not a concern so much as how is that reported? In audit year.
Just on the pages that were just shown to you, I think.
Right.
Yes, as far as salary expense, yeah, the actuary could probably answer better at IMRF what an effect on increasing your wages would be
Right.
on the actual pension liability, the total pension liability that you might have. So if you do raise salaries on those who are eligible for IMRF,
Yeah,
then most
the
likely
obligation goes up.
the total pension liability would go up as well.
Right.
But that's, like I said, that's an actuary would have to give you
Right.
a better idea on that, so.
I mean, I do understand that. I'm just wondering how year to year within the audit, how that is reflected in this report.
Yeah, what we basically do is we get a report from IMRF's actuaries, and then we perform certain procedures on that. The IMRF auditors also perform certain procedures that we then rely on. They provide reports that we rely on. So we take those figures and then record that net pension liability. Then that doesn't go in the general fund. It only goes in those government-wide financial statements that I talked about that had that long-term focus. So that's where that liability would get recorded, although right now it's an asset. So you're in a good position with it being an asset as opposed to
Thank you.
huge liability. So hopefully that answers your questions.
I don't know, page 27. Percentage. That's gonna fluctuate with the declining this year. That's leveled off.
Yeah, and that's due, like I said, to how well the fund has performed
Right.
over the last 5 or 6 years. The more well-funded you are, the lower that contribution percentage is going to be. So you're at 8.81% of covered payroll. That's excellent. I mean, that is very low.
Because it just seemed like the percentages were really kind of all over the map as we look.
Well,
6 years.
right, but again, like, as he said, it also has to do with how well IMRF's investment returns are too.
And they, to the greatest extent possible, they smooth out investment returns over 5 years. So if you have a great investment year, a bad investment year, it's not going to hurt your contribution rate quite as much. You don't take the hit in 1 year, it gets smoothed out over 5. So you're not, what you can budget a little bit better too, because you don't know, is it going to be 8%, is it going to be 15%? So they do try to smooth it out as much as possible.
Thank you.
Any other questions?
Yeah, thanks for your time tonight.
Thank you.
Okay. So next item is trustee comments and board calendar. Anyone with anything? Don't see anything super notable in the calendar, which is page 74 of the PDF. Does anyone have any comments?
You said 74?
74 of the PDF, yes.
Am I missing where iGov is on here? Am I just not seeing it?
iGov hasn't been scheduled.
Thanks, Colleen.
Yep. The 24th, yeah, okay, that's the first day of school, but
Yeah.
something to look forward to.
What month, September?
For lots of reasons. No,
Okay.
August.
Oh, August.
It's the first day of D97.
Yeah.
Oh, even better.
Yes. So, all right. I have one small comment. If anyone has not been following the developments in the Niles Main Library Board issues, I would highly suggest it.
Brew a pot of tea.
It is quite something. I had a brief email with some folks at ILA about it because there was a Capital Facts had a posting about it a few weeks ago, and I had made a comment under my name of my distress regarding the effects of elections that people aren't paying attention to, and how municipal government is often overlooked and taken for granted in certain areas. And a number of folks from ILA noticed and appreciated my comments and have commented that there's many eyes in ILA, the Illinois Library Association, who are keeping track of the developments there. So I think we may see that as a lesson learned, hopefully in future years, as to the helping reinforce the importance of public libraries and the attention and appreciation they deserve.
Virginia, which comment did you need repeated?
It was a bit ago. I think Jeremy asked a question while we were going through the audit.
Sorry about that.
No worries.
All right. If there's no other comments, we'll move on to staff reports.
Great. So I mentioned in my director's report all of the services and programs and hours that we returned following the pandemic. Of course, we are getting very concerned about the direction that infections are moving, and watching very closely what the state, the county, and if necessary, what our local public health authority might say. As of now, we have not changed any of our plans for what we've either already done or what we're still hoping to do after Labor Day, which is to reopen public spaces such as this for public reservations again. But obviously we're going to watch throughout the month of August and make sure that we're still feeling comfortable about doing that. But for now, all of our spaces are open. Most of our hours have been returned to pre-pandemic conditions, except for evening hours at the branches. But all of our locations are open. All of our spaces are open. We don't have any occupancy restrictions. We are only asking people who are unvaccinated to wear masks in our public spaces. And as I said, we'll continue to watch carefully what happens, and we'll come back to the board if we think we need to rethink any of the rest of our choices. So do you have any questions about that?
Yeah, I guess my question is, how closely do we follow the city of Chicago? Because I know that the governor announced that if the cases go up to 200 new cases a day, then there would be a revisiting the indoor mask mandate. And we're at what, 175 right now, maybe?
Yeah, we really spent the last year and a half following very closely what our own Oak Park Public Health director had to say about all of these things. That was our first sort of point of contact there. And of course most of those directives followed directions from either the state or the county. So we haven't really made many, if any, decisions based strictly on what the city of Chicago would say or do, but we do pay very close attention to what the Oak Park Public Health Authority is saying. And so far, I haven't seen any changes or any new restrictions or recommendations that the public health director here has made. So
I know that we're expecting a spike because of Lollapalooza
yeah, well, I know.
in Chicago.
Yeah. So other than that, I don't know that I don't want to repeat anything I wrote in the report, but if you have any other questions about the strategic priorities report, which we'll get to in a moment, any of our anti-racism work, I mentioned a lot of the activity again that some of which I was talking about on Saturday, work that the anti-racism advisory team was helping us do, the status of our job search for a director of equity and anti-racism, and some of the policy work that we're doing that followed RGW's equity audit of some of those. And I mentioned some of the grant opportunities, both that we've received from state allocations and what would be available to us from the American Rescue Plan Act I think I mentioned those on Saturday morning too, that we're going to work to try to apply for the opportunities that the state library has made available. So then again, other than my report, you've got the much longer strategic priorities report. And again, I hope you had a chance to read about all of the public facing anti-racism programs and events that staff are describing there. A great deal of work going on there, and also for Pride Month. And then again, I had mentioned a lot of great information about some of the community engagement and home delivery services, and we were talking a little bit about that on Saturday morning too. And then after the narrative report, then you have the typical core use statistics report that shows current numbers and then how they compare to averages for the last couple of years. So any comments or questions that you'd like to ask about any of those reports now? I would be happy to try to answer.
I just have one question. It was about the Google ads.
Yeah.
And the $10,000, I think it was $10,000.
Yeah, the Google Ads Koyos engagement.
Yeah. So I mean, I vaguely understand, but I just wanted to, so there was one line that I didn't understand, and it was, we're close to spending all of our $10,000 in ad credits monthly.
Thankfully, Jody is here. Jody, you want to explain ad credits?
Sure. So.
Why don't you come up to the mic?
Okay.
Here we are.
So through, too bad Sarah's not here because I know she works at Google. Through Google, they offer nonprofits in education, and libraries are a part of that. The opportunity to get $10,000 a month of in-kind advertising. This is the leftover advertising after they've sold it to for-profit companies. So the idea there is they always have space running, and libraries benefit from that in the way that we're not spending any money. It's like monopoly money that we're using to be positioned only within our geographic zip code area. When people search on something, an ad will pop up that says, say they search Oak Park Public Library, then the results will come up, but you know, results when you do a search on any search engine are going to have the paid advertising and then the regular stuff. So the idea here is more visibility, because not only would we show up in the paid bracket, but we would show up in the regular Google search results. So the idea, it's kind of complex, and I'll do my best to keep it short. Companies bid on different search terms, and as a part of being in the Google ad space, our company we're working with, Koyos, is helping us bid on these terms as well. But for-profit companies are typically going to bid higher. If a particular title or service or search term that we have running in our campaign isn't fully spent, then our stuff is going to pop up. And there's a dollar value assigned to that. So the goal of all of this is to try to get $10,000 every month, like to make sure that you're aligning your campaigns with the search words that are popular in your community, so that you're taking full advantage of the grant. So when the line says we're almost spending close to the $10,000, that means that our campaigns are showing up a lot. That's the shortest way, I think, to say it.
I also noticed that in that section of the report that you also mentioned that we were targeting specific populations that we were finding that we wanted to reach in particular. So like people who don't have a library card, but we want them to. So is that I'm assuming that's all it's all data driven but what populations other than, the people who don't have library cards, who else is being targeted? Is it geographical?
It is geographical, but we can look at library cards is always a big one. Recently, there's a bubble line chart in the packet itself that shows the top right is going to show what's been most popular.
Mm.
And the circles are gonna show what's had the best click-through rate. So there, if I'm remembering correctly, I think there's a pink circle in the middle, and that's library cards. And the circles correspond with the data number chart underneath.
Mhm.
And so what that's saying is we've got a pretty good click-through rate when people in our zip code search for library cards, that our ad pops up and they click on it.
Mm.
So yay, good. The campaigns that seem to be doing the best, if you want to say they're getting the most exposure, are on the far right. I'm looking at David.
Museum passes. and
Right.
YouTube,
And I think
the
the,
car catalog.
yeah. The catalog campaign is one that runs alongside the individual search terms that we provide. And that is, the company takes a download of all the books we have in the Oak Park catalog, and they enter those as search terms. So the idea being, if someone searches for the Midnight Library, not only will it come up in the right-hand column of the search terms, as you can check that out as an ebook at Mays Library if you happen to live near Mays Library, but it'll also come up at the top as an ad that'll take you through it. So it's cool. Yeah.
So if someone is searching racism in Oak Park,
Mhm.
then possibly there would be an Oak Park Public Library ad that would
Yeah.
say, come here to find out about.
It would say the headline of whatever's on that particular page, which I think is "We're on an anti-racism journey, join us." And that was on the results. And if it's not in the packet, I did get it's a month
It's
lag.
here, yeah.
Okay, it was in the results again for this past month, because I saw it today. So that's good.
Thank you.
It's kind
Yeah,
of
sure.
scary, it's kind of scary, isn't it?
It's a lot of info.
Thank you, Jody.
Yes.
Thank you.
I have a question. So the Library for All is this year's like $25,000 grant program.
Well, the one we just received, in fact, we're still waiting for the check to come.
Okay,
Yes,
and last year's was,
was Books Empower.
right. How did we do on that? Did we get,
So we haven't finished the grant period yet, but we're almost fully expended on it.
we are,
That was those were the reports that I had forwarded to you last month, the quarterly report, grant reports. Those were all about Books Empower.
right. So I was just wondering what, because we're coming to the end of that.
We're coming to the end. I think the final quarter and report will be in, I believe, September.
Okay,
Yes.
Okay.
But at this point, so it was, a grant, a typical state grant, or either through these appropriations or through the state library, they're typically just a 1-year grant period. So it's 4
Right.
quarters for various reasons, some of which were I think related to the pandemic. That particular, they gave us extra time to expend that money.
oh, that's fantastic.
So when we got that money, they actually told us we had essentially a year and a half. So they're like 6 quarters.
Okay.
So we finished the 5th, and now we're in the 6th. So I'm pretty sure that ends in September, and we're way, like, we're over 75% expended on it.
Oh, that's great.
Yeah.
And so then when does this grant period start?
So it has just started.
Okay,
It started in June,
okay,
and so we'll continue until June of next
okay.
year.
And so this one's a year. not a
Yeah, this
year
one's
now.
1 year. Yeah, this
Cool.
one's 1 year.
Thank you.
Any other questions about any of the reports, the narratives or the statistical reports?
Okay. We'll move on to our financial reports.
So we've kind of flipped it around starting this month. You're seeing Jeremy's narrative first, sort of to set the stage for the rest of the spreadsheets and reports that you'll see that follow. And let me just point out that in your places, and you got this, and this was emailed to you late this afternoon. Staff noticed an error in the expenditures reported for this month for human capital. Essentially, the expenses for human capital were overstated because mistakenly an additional payroll for the month of July was mistakenly added into the report that was supposed to be just for June. So what appeared in your board packet actually overstated the expenses for human capital for the month. So they found that error, and then Jeremy reprinted it so that it backtracked that extra payroll out of the report. So that's why you got those emails late this afternoon, and why we put those because I just want to make sure that you're talking about and or approving the correct report.
Rita, am I looking at the corrected report on the iPad?
No.
No, I'm sorry. Yeah, what's on your iPad is not. What's in front of you is. Yeah, there
It was
should.
about a $200,000.
Is it there?
Okay.
I sucked over the
You have a
year
copy of it?
fifteen payroll journal
That's right.
entry because
Okay.
I had the parameters set for the whole year instead of just
Do you-
10/30.
Matt doesn't seem to have it. Do you have it? So anyway, I wanted, before you started talking about the reports, I wanted to point that out. Is that what I said correct? Yes, okay.
Yeah, what you'll see in the fourth column there, the year-to-date totals, that's how the parameters were set. So depending on when the report was, it included one of the July payrolls. So we'll be changing that.
Jeremy, you're gonna need to come to the table to talk into one of the microphones, because Virginia can't hear you.
All right, so, yeah, since the column, the year-to-date 2021 totals, those parameters were set as year-to-date. So we'll be adjusting that, so it'll be, the parameters will specify a particular month, so there will be a hard cutoff on the
Just
reports.
January through the period we're talking about. I had it set January to December.
Yeah, and so
Okay.
the difference, compensation, which kind of, because of that, cascades down into total human capital. And then small amount in payroll processing. And then the total operating costs. So Ted, you had mentioned that last week about the financial report summary. Like at the beginning, it notes 50% of the year, so we're halfway through the year. So that you think of that as like a water line for all of the other expenditures as we go through there, and revenue. So revenue, we're just over 60% here. So then all of the other expenditures, as you look at the second page of the financial summary, you'll see all of those expenses levels and see where we're at. And so at a quick glance, you can see that we're under expended on total human capital. And then, for example, administration is 57%. So that's still a little over budget, but that's because of prepaid insurance. So all of the other ones, you can just look at it as kind of a watermark for where those expenses are. So most of the other line items there in groups are under expended at this time.
I had one question about our overextending on our facilities budget for, well, I guess not facilities, but for lawn care and for snow. And that there was a lot of snow in February, and so is that why we are so close?
Yes.
Okay,
Yeah.
so can we add this, sorry, can we add this to, I know this is so dark, but can we add this to our budget discussions? That as our climate changes and we start to think about what it would mean for the library if our basement flooded or we had snow in April. That we, as a board, start talking about what that might mean.
Of course.
And along the same lines, it'll certainly become a discussion point when we talk about insurance. We just had an estimate from our insurer at the last mid-year meeting, and they project
Volatility.
40% increase.
Yeah.
And a big part of that is weather, the impacts that the insurance companies are having with that, the claims, and cybersecurity as well. It's something that we do have coverage on, and they said at this point, that may increase.
Do they have a ballpark on how much that's gonna increase?
Well, as a
whole.
As a whole,
Got it,
it would be a
40%.
40% increase, which was similar to last year's increase as well. And then they
It's
also
going up.
warned us that.
I'm sorry. Jeremy, did you say 40%?
Yes.
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 40.
And then
Just wanted to make sure I actually heard that. Okay.
Yes.
Now, last year they gave us a larger range. I think it was 40 to 60. So we actually put in the budget, the higher range to be more conservative, and it did come in a little lower. So we're going to be a little bit ahead on that. Let me correct that. 30% increase is what they're estimating. this
Okay,
year.
30.
No, that's completely different.
Oh.
We're totally fine.
That's the
We're
salesman.
the
check.
lead.
Yeah, just 30, just.
No, so 30% increase is what we'll put into the budget. And then in November, we should have firm numbers on that going into the budget. Or it'll already be
It's
approved by
yeah,
then.
it's a challenge because we often have to approve our budget before they give us the final numbers. And so we're
Okay.
often, they're giving us as close an estimate as they can because they know we have to pass a budget, but the final numbers don't usually come until the end of the year after we've adopted the budget.
And the other thing, which I just had a conversation today, we currently have a request for proposals out for new floor service, janitorial and floor cleaning. And one of the potential vendors was talking to me about, well, there's issues with staffing. So price may need to be adjusted on that as well. Those are hard things that.
Yes.
Thank you.
So I'm sorry, Jeremy, but you said that, I wanted to just be clear that when the insurance company projected this 30% increase, they particularly flagged cybersecurity and the weather.
Right, the claims on large claims nationwide. Some of the, like the cybersecurity, I think they said the largest insurer in the world, French company, won't give cyber insurance anymore.
You?
They won't insure against cyber attacks.
They're not insuring against.
Like if you have to pay a ransom, they're not going to cover you.
So they said that could happen here too. I think we'll still have it this coming year, but things could change if that continues.
Thanks.
They'll give them reelect.
Thanks a lot.
Trevor, you don't have to stay for the rest of the meeting. You're free to go. You've done your part, but it's like, you're welcome to stay, but I don't want to feel like you will not hurt anyone.
He's giving you an out.
If you would
Stick
like.
around for at least a financial report.
Yeah, there you
Love
go.
numbers.
Fair enough.
All right.
Thank you, Jeremy.
Thank you. Any other questions regarding the narrative report? Okay, we have our disbursements. Is there a motion to approve the disbursements?
So moved.
Moved by Ted. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Seconded by Colleen. Is there any further discussion? Any questions? Hearing none. Those in favor of approving the disbursements resolution, say aye.
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 Hi.
Aye.
Those opposed, say nay. They are approved. Excellent. We will.
I was so close to making a joke about where are all these books on our budget? Like what are we doing with all these?
Well, that was one of the one article about the Niles, Maine, was the person who was currently the board president was asking about the staff to produce, as part of the budgeting process, a prediction of the individual books that they would be buying in the coming year and the actual like detailed cost of what it would be. And it was just, I mean, the story of it is just, it's bananas. Though the executive director do quit. If they forced her out. She had been there for 23 years on various levels, but okay. We will move on to additional reports, IGov.
IGov has not met.
Okay,
Do they have a meeting scheduled
I don't think they are interested in meeting in this.
in the summer? Okay, got it.
Yeah, I think we'll pick back up in the fall.
Got it.
got it. Okay, COG did not meet in July, and neither did the ILA legislation advocacy. We had a general ILA orientation session for all of the new committee appointments. Kind of getting all the new appointments for all the different.
Oh, that's because the administration year begins in July.
Yeah,
right.
So.
I do have a question for do you still have a staff person?
Luann,
Luann is still a staff person.
yeah.
And the Friends did not, oh, I'm sorry.
That changes.
Yeah, and the Friends didn't meet in July either.
Okay. And we have our library employment separation report.
Yes.
We will move on to new business. Our whistleblower reporting and anti-retaliation policy.
Yes. So as I mentioned in my report, an action by the Illinois State Legislature, Public Act 101-652 requires that government agencies adopt this policy. And based on that obligation, our attorney drafted this general policy and recommends that we just adopt it verbatim, because we have to have a policy adopted based on that public act. So
That was my only question, if this is verbatim or
Yeah.
if we.
Just to be completely transparent, the only thing I changed was to make the pronouns a little more inclusive in the document, because I didn't think you'd like them the way that they were. So I just changed that, but otherwise it's verbatim the way that the attorneys drafted it.
Okay.
And you have no problems with it?
No, oh, well, even if I did, Ted, the state legislature wouldn't care.
All right, does anyone have any questions?
What were the
Okay.
pronouns?
Well, he, his, she, hers, and I just changed them all to
To
them.
employee,
Appreciate it.
yeah, I like that. Very nice.
I have a quick question. I don't know if this is even particularly relevant for us, but David, can you speak to what would have happened in our particular library if we had not been asked to adopt this? Like, what was the process beforehand?
Well, I mean, we have other policies that allow staff to bring grievances of various sorts, and we have written procedures for how we handle those from the director through the director of human resources. So we would have followed those procedures. I don't know if I'm answering your question though.
Do you see this as a great departure from what we would have done anyway?
No, not really. But, like a lot of things, when the state legislature does this, there was probably something that happened somewhere in the state of Illinois, and they decided that they had to adopt an act that covered everybody in the state. So no,
Uniform response.
new uniform response. So I don't see that this would change the way that we would do the kind of process that we would follow. It's just, now it has to be codified in a policy.
Okay, that's all I wanted to know. Thank you.
Is there a motion to adopt the policy as presented?
I'll make a motion.
Motion by Colleen. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Virginia. Is there any further discussion? Hearing no further discussion, all those in favor say aye.
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 Those opposed say nay. Any abstentions? The policy is adopted. Thank you, everyone. New business 8B.
So I just put this on the agenda, thinking that there are things from our conversation on Saturday that you might want to, continue talking about or asking about tonight. Particularly since, Jeremy, Director of Operations, is here, Jody, Director of Communications, is here. So that's why I added it to the agenda. Of course, it's your meeting, so you can decide how you want to spend this time.
Then, of course, this is not a last call on
No, of
this,
course
on
not.
this issue.
Right.
Of course, we can revisit this in other meetings. This is not a speak now, forever hold your peace
No,
situation.
of course not. Because again, like I said, we now in August, you'll be seeing a first draft of a budget for fiscal year 2022. And, and based on what I heard at Saturday's meeting, we're going to come back with a budget that begins with the revenue projections and then begins with or expectations and then begins with expenditure expectations, particularly for human resources, human capital. And what I heard was that you're very much in favor of continuing the journey of salary and wage equity that we started a couple of months ago. So Billy will be here for that meeting as well. Billy Treese, our Director of Human Resources, and he'll be ready to talk about how, what that has looked like over the last couple of years, what the objectives have been. He'll have some simple graphs and charts to show you. And then through the expenditure projections, that Jeremy will show you, what that is going to look like in terms of the numbers if we continue doing the things that we expect to do. And then from there, have a conversation again about what this board is comfortable with in terms of a tax levy. So that's typically how we start in August with revenue projections, and then that part of the budget that is the biggest by far, which is human capital, wages, salaries, benefits, staff learning. So that's how we'll start in August. So if there's anything tonight that you want to add to what you were thinking or saying on Saturday night, or any questions about that you want to ask tonight, again, that's why I set this aside of time to do that.
So Saturday morning, right? Did it feel like Saturday night to you?
Oh, did I say Saturday night?
Yeah,
I'm sorry.
I know, I understand. It was a lot like a party in here.
It's not a mess.
I totally get it. But the serious question that I had was the same question that I had on Saturday, which was thinking about wage equity even through benefits. And I see the numbers for the pension plan.
Right.
What about health benefits? I'm not really, I have no idea how that works at the library. Like, do employees pay in a certain amount, I'm guessing,
We do, yes.
to their health benefits? And if
What is the number right now, Jeremy? 10%? Yeah, 10%. 10%.
it's a flat 10% for.
Flat 10% for staff, regardless of the plan that they choose. And when we offer various plans, PPOs, HMOs that staff can choose. And then that also applies if they are just electing the coverage for themselves, or if they're electing it for family members as well.
And that's in our control, that percentage?
Yes, that percentage is within our control. There are some things that are within our control and some things that are not.
Okay.
That we get to decide. But then, but when we decide, again, there may be, and Billy, when he's here, would be the best person to really talk you through this. There may be certain laws and regulations that we have to follow in terms of how we do that. So in other words, when we decide what it is, how uniformly does that need to be applied for every employee?
Okay. Can I feel very audacious asking this, but is it possible to have, or to think through, for Billy to think through it, I guess, a progressive rather than a flat tax or a flat percentage model?
Mm-hmm. So in other words, the percentage that an employee would contribute would be dependent on various factors, such as their wage.
Exactly.
Things like that. Okay. Yeah. I mean, he may have questions
Sure.
about that. So I may need to come back and help him out to ask a few questions about that. But sure. I mean, I can tell him tomorrow that you had that question, and he can, tell me how he would start to think about that.
Well, then I guess I would love to ask the rest of my board what they think. I mean, it's hard because we're literally talking about like your salaries, but like just try to, I mean, if you think there's any merit in that kind of an idea for,
On Saturday, my understanding was that you were concerned that if it was a fixed dollar amount rather than a percentage, that then that would be
inequitable, right? If, you know, if it was say $100.
Sure.
So somebody making a much lower salary and somebody making much higher salary, then the percentage would be off. So I'm comforted to hear that it is a percentage instead of a, you know, something that's going to make that equity worse.
Yeah, I mean, and me too. Like, I think that a percentage, a flat percentage is better than a flat dollar amount. But I think like with progressive taxes, I think that like a progressive percentage is even more equitable because it takes into account like other things like cost of living, for
Right,
instance, and
right.
what things, you know, and
And how
of
much
course there's a-
expendable.
Yeah, and
income
also that
everybody
people
has.
who are in lower wage brackets tend to have fewer options when it comes to healthcare, or, you know, are in other compounding factors which make their healthcare more expensive. So again, I'm not saying that we immediately adopt it, but you know, and I understand it's not standard, but I would.
I'll ask Billy to start thinking about it, and I'm sure he will tell me exactly what he thinks.
Okay. I appreciate it. Thank you. You can pass those on to me.
No worries.
Just, you know, accidentally email me like, oh, no, I'm sorry.
No worries.
I only had one item from Saturday that I feel like I failed to bring up, which is our vendor relationships and how we procure services for the library.
Yep.
And what we prioritize when we do that. So do we have like a lowest bid type situation where we just go with whoever is got the lowest price, or do we also factor in if it's a, you know, minority or woman-owned business, or if it's a business that is housed in the village, those kinds of things?
Yeah. So, so I guess the first thing is that we actually have very few vendor relationships that even, you know, would either require any kind of a bid process, or where there's actually much of a choice. I mean, for instance, the most of our vendors are vendors that provide us with library materials. And in those cases, there really are no choices to speak of. So then we're talking about vendors for things like what Jeremy was mentioning a few minutes ago, which is for cleaning and maintaining the building. And, you know, most of those relationships, we do not have to take the lowest bid because they're considered services rather than physical things like equipment and materials. And so we can look at a lot of different things. We can consider, you know, whether or not it is a minority-owned business, or whether or not it is a Black-owned business, or whether or not it is a woman-owned business. And we can prioritize those kinds of things in making those decisions. So when we're going out and looking for proposals for a cleaning service, you know, we're trying to do things to encourage a variety or a diverse group of companies as far as they're available to make a proposal. So right, so it's only when where the law is very clear that if you are purchasing physical equipment, you know, machinery, furniture, where you are required in many cases, if you're required to go out to bid, then you, in many cases, you would be required to, as long as what's called accepting the lowest responsible bid. Like, so does it meet all of your specifications? And if you have 3 that meet all of the specifications, exactly the same thing, and it's that kind of equipment, then in some of those cases, you are required to take the lowest bid. But for a lot of other things that we do, we're not required to do that.
So my follow-up to that would be, if we are about to rebid our janitorial services,
Right.
what are the criteria that we're going to be looking at?
So we have the bid documents, which we can share with you if you want to take a look at them. I'll have Jeremy send them to you tomorrow, and you can see what we're putting out there for proposals.
That'd be great.
And you can give us your, you know, if you have opinions about that, you can let us know.
Okay.
Yeah.
Super.
And it's available on the website.
You know, while we're
I'm sorry, Virginia, go ahead. I'm sorry.
Oh, I was gonna say, while we're making requests of Jeremy, you've mentioned, Jeremy, a few things that we sort of expect to increase in our budget next year that are somewhat outside of our control, that maybe when we were all speaking on Saturday, I can say for sure snow removal was not at the top of mind when I was thinking about budget items. Would it be possible for, before we look at your rendering of the potential budget, that you can kind of point out some of those explicit things and where they fall within that budget, so that we can see why those numbers are moving? Just because I think in our conversation on Saturday, I really learned that some things are a little bit buried, and I think I'd appreciate being able to see those things that you know are going to move and seeing where they are in the budget.
Did you want that like now or for the next meeting?
Not like right this minute, but if it's something that we could if it's something we could look over maybe when we get the board packet next month, or slightly ahead of that, just so that as we're digesting those numbers, we're taking that information into account as well. That 40% that I think you revised to 30% really caught me off guard and made me think, what other things are going to increase that, before we definitely thought were discretionary, that maybe are a little less discretionary in this environment than we had anticipated.
And we will, yeah, we definitely can do that, and we will have all of the proposals in for the janitorial service. That's definitely our largest ongoing contract, annual contract.
Yeah.
And so we'll have a good idea of what the range is. I think the last time we went to RFP for that in 2019, late 2019, the range was from about 174 to 250,000. And so we'll see. Now the 250, he came back and said that was high, but he had some errors in his calculation. But I'm expecting it to be, over 175 into 200 range. So we'll have hard numbers coming back for the August meeting.
Okay.
And when you said that there were staffing issues and that might impact it, can you say more about that?
Yeah, so I think he was implying that as they try to staff to a certain level to clean the 3 facilities at the extent that we really want them to, they're having a hard time finding staff to do that work. And so their pay is getting hit as well. So they're having to pay more for the staff, which in turn is going to pass down to us.
And then are there new requirements in terms of cleaning because of the pandemic and COVID?
No, I don't think so. I think we have, as you'll see in the RFP, like I said, it's on the news page. If you go to news, I think Jody has it, news events. So it's on our homepage. You'll see the link there to the full request for proposal. And it has specified in there what are the daily cleaning items, what are the weekly, monthly, and then the biannual floor service. So it should all be in there, and any of the cleaning that we should need should already be in there as well. So there's nothing added in there. Now, last year we did have a couple periods when we asked our current provider to come in and disinfect the building. And so there were a couple different times. I think there was about $5,000 at one point, and then $4,000 for the second one. But then at that point, the CDC said that really isn't the issue. So our staff here can disinfect as needed if there's an office or a specific case that we can disinfect the area. So we do that, but it is really more precautionary than it feels like.
And then also with the janitorial, like, is there something that can be done in terms of sustainability and what kinds of, like, what they use? and the impact that that might have.
That is one of the selection criteria that we had when we selected our current provider. And that's something that we'll be looking at in the RFP as well. What are the chemicals and how sustainable is that?
Thanks, Jeremy.
Any other questions? Okay. So we will move on to item 9A, closed session.
Okay, before you do, just let me explain what we're going to do. I'm going to pause the Zoom recording for the regular meeting and for the, and of course, Virginia will stay on the Zoom. She'll still be able to participate. And then we're going to go back to audio recordings of the closed session. So the recorder is all set. And then after the closed session ends, we'll stop that and then I'll resume the recording of the Zoom session for the rest of the meeting. Make sense?
2 thumbs up.
Okay, great. It actually should be very
Very short,
brief, so
okay.
if you don't mind sticking around, that would be great.
All right. Is there a motion to enter closed session?
So moved.
Thank you, Virginia. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Ted. And this will require a roll call vote. Trustee Bloom.
Trustee Bloom.
So I'm trying to talk.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Trustee Fairfax.
Yes.
Trustee Treco Birchie.
Yeah, yes.
Trustee Foss.
Yes.
Trustee Burns.
Yes.
Trustee Freeth, yes.
Okay, I'm going to pause the recording now.
That's going into the
We
safe.
have exited closed session at 7:52 PM. And the next item on our agenda is a decision on the status of closed session minutes.
Is that actually a cassette?
So you have three separate motions proposed that you can second and adopt as you determine appropriate.
Is there the motion to approve the minutes from the 3 meetings as presented? Moved by Ted. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Virginia. Thank you. All those in favor say aye.
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 That's enough, Commissioner.
Those opposed say nay. Those minutes are approved. The next motion is for sets of meetings to be released and made public as approved. Is there a motion?
I'll make the motion.
Moved by
So
Colleen
moved.
and seconded by Virginia. Any further discussion? Hearing none. Those in favor say aye.
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 Those opposed say nay. Those are approved. And finally, a motion to destroy verbatim records as for the 2 meetings listed. Is there a motion?
I'll move.
Colleen moves. Is there a second? Second. Seconded by Ted. Any further discussion? Hearing none. Those in favor say aye.
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 Those opposed say nay. And that motion carries. We have concluded item
And
10.
you need these, correct?
Yeah, give those all back to me.
And having concluded all business on our agenda, this meeting, it stands adjourned.
Thank you, Matt.
You are very welcome.